The lights of Delta Station 9 flickered in restless rhythm with the hum of its aging reactors, a mechanical heartbeat echoing through the arteries of a forgotten trade post. Outside, the void stretched infinite and cold, sprinkled with the dim embers of distant suns. The station hung there like a relic from a more ambitious age, its once bright hull dulled by meteor dust and the long sigh of neglect. But life persisted within its corroded walls, restless, transient, and hungry for something more than survival. Lyra Dean wiped a glass clean behind the counter of the Dragon's Rest Cantina, the most reliable shelter for broken travelers this side of Vega 4. She moved with quiet precision, her motions practiced to invisibility. The cantina was dim, filled with the soft murmur of alien tongues and the smell of ionized air from faulty purifiers. Overhead, the old holocene buzzed faintly, casting her in a crimson glow. To anyone watching, she was just another human clinging to the edges of civilization, lean, quiet, unremarkable. The kind of person no one remembered when the ship departed. She had been here for years. Long enough that the station's denizens stopped asking about her past. She served them food, sometimes smiled, and always listened, never speaking more than she had to. The miners told stories of strange things they'd seen near the asteroids, derelict ships, shadows that moved against starlight. The smugglers bragged about close calls with patrol fleets. The soldiers, when they came through, spoke in low voices about the war on the outer colonies. Lyra listened to all of it, absorbing their words like static through an old receiver, her face unreadable. Only her eyes betrayed a different kind of knowing, the kind born from memories that never fade no matter how many lives you try to live afterward. The door hissed open with the scrape of stressed metal. A squad of human marines entered. 5 of them, armor scuffed and faces pale beneath carbon scoring. They carried a man between them, his uniform marked with the insignia of a starship captain. Blood leaked through the fabric at his side, pulsing in rhythm with the low whine of the life support field clinging to his armor. They brought him to the counter, shouting for help. Lyra didn't move at first. She simply studied them, the fear in their eyes, the exhaustion in their voices. Then, without hesitation, she slid from behind the counter, brushing past the patrons who froze in sudden silence. "Clear that table," she said softly, and something in her tone made everyone obey. Her hands moved with surety as she examined the wound. It was cauterized badly, plasma burn, not shrapnel. The kind of injury that meant close quarters fighting with no med unit nearby. The youngest Marine tried to explain, stammering through his panic. "Threx ambush. They came out of nowhere, ma'am. Our ship's gone. We barely made it through the atmosphere before." Before the jammers hit, Lyra finished for him. Her fingers worked quickly, sealing the wound with a portable medgel patch from her apron pocket, a tool no waitress should have. "You're cut off. They'll come for you next." The Marine blinked, surprised that she knew. "How do you?" But before he could finish, the floor trembled. The lights dimmed to emergency red. Through the viewport behind the bar, the blackness of space erupted in white fire, plasma lances cutting across the void as distant ships exchanged volleys. The Threx were not human. They were machines built for conquest, their fleets moving with an eerie, insect-like coordination. When they came, they did not negotiate. They dismantled. The patrons scattered, the sound of chaos filling the room. The Marines rushed to secure the wounded captain, but the station's defense sirens were already screaming. Lyra looked up toward the ceiling where the old communication relays crackled with static. She moved to the back room without a word. The Marines tried to stop her, but she brushed them off. "Stay with him," she ordered, disappearing through the hatch. The service corridor was narrow and dark, its walls lined with coolant pipes and exposed cables. Lyra's hand brushed over the panels until she found what she was looking for, an obsolete security interface, half buried in grime. She pried it open and slid a worn data key into the slot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft blue light spread through the circuits like awakening veins. "System override recognized," said a voice, old, mechanical, and female. "Identity confirmation required." "Dean." "Lyra," she answered. "Authorization code, Dragon 1. The voice paused. "Code inactive since the rebellion accords." "Reactivate?" "Do it." The hum of the station deepened, old systems stirring from slumber. External shields flickered online, stabilizers reoriented, and ancient weapon turrets began to cycle through diagnostic rotations. Lyra's face was illuminated by the console's light, the years falling away from her expression. The silence of peace was gone. The dragon had awoken. When she returned to the cantina, the Marines were staring out the viewport. The enemy ships were closing in, angular, black, and beautiful in their precision. The captain stirred, groaning. His eyes opened just enough to focus on her. For a heartbeat, confusion crossed his face. Then recognition. "Impossible," he whispered. "You're..." Later, Lyra said sharply. She picked up a blaster rifle from one of the stunned soldiers, checked its charge, and looked at the men now watching her with disbelief. "You want to live? Then follow my lead. The threats are coming, and this station isn't as defenseless as it looks." In that moment, beneath the flickering neon of the Dragon's Rest, something ancient stirred in the hearts of those who heard her. A quiet human flame, older than fear itself, waiting only for a voice like hers to call it back to life. The hull of Delta Station 9 trembled under the first barrage. The sound wasn't explosive but deep and resonant, a vibration that crawled through the bones like a warning from the void itself. Dust fell from the ceiling vents as Lyra led the Marines through the narrow service corridors, her steps sure even as the walls shuddered around them. Emergency lights flashed a dull crimson, pulsing in time with the low mechanical hum of the station's awakening defenses. "Where are we going?" one of the Marines shouted over the noise. "To the command core," Lyra replied without looking back. "If the threats breach the outer hull, they'll try to disable the power relays first. We need to reroute manually before that happens." Her voice carried authority, crisp, unwavering, and the men obeyed without question. She moved like someone who had mapped every vent and maintenance shaft years ago, as if the whole station were an extension of her own mind. They passed through rows of power conduits that glowed faintly blue, each one thrumming with renewed energy. The systems she had reactivated were older than most of the soldiers following her, relics from the wars humanity had tried to forget. A sharp crack echoed from somewhere ahead. The youngest Marine, a wiry boy with terrified eyes, raised his weapon. A service droid rolled into view, its plating scarred and optics flickering. It paused when it saw Lyra, then emitted a low chirp before continuing down the hall. "They're responding to you," said another soldier, watching the machine with suspicion. "You programmed them?" Lyra didn't answer. She approached a terminal at the corridor's junction, pulling open a panel to reveal tangled cables. Her fingers moved fast, linking conduits, rerouting current. The station's map flickered across the display, glowing red where enemy ships had latched onto the docking rings. "They've breached sectors 6 and 7, she said quietly. "They'll move inward fast. They don't waste time on intimidation." Captain Vale stirred weakly on the stretcher they carried. His voice rasped through the haze of painkillers. "If you're right, they'll send their synthetics first, soften us before the main boarding." Lyra's lips tightened. "They won't get that far." She pressed a final command into the terminal. Across the lower decks, the lights dimmed, and a series of metallic groans reverberated as the old defense grids came online. Somewhere in the darkness, automated turrets deployed from their housings, their targeting optics flaring to life for the first time in a decade. The attack came moments later. The first of the Threx drones, black, insectal constructs with serrated limbs, cut through a cargo bay door and poured into the hallways like a swarm. Their movements were unnervingly fluid, coordinated through a shared neural link. The Marines opened fire, plasma bolts slicing through the gloom. The air filled with the acrid scent of burning metal. Lyra took position near the command junction, firing with precision that silenced all doubt about who she truly was. Her shots were methodical, clean, never wasted. She moved between cover points with an instinctive understanding of the battlefield, as though every ricochet and every spark fit into a pattern she alone could see. When a drone lunged for one of the Marines, she spun, drove the butt of her rifle into its optic node, and tore out its core with a motion too fast to follow. "They'll keep coming," she said. "We need to draw them towards Sector 4. I've reconfigured the plasma vents there, it'll buy us time." They retreated in formation, step by step, through corridors that seemed to twist endlessly. The station's AI, long dormant, whispered faint fragments through the intercoms, * unauthorized entities detected. Defense protocol engaged. * The voice was calm, but the metallic shriek of drone claws scraping bulkheads made every syllable sound like a countdown. They reached the maintenance hub, a wide circular chamber surrounded by reactor conduits and storage tanks. Lyra knelt beside the primary console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "When I give the signal," she said, "seal all access points. The plasma conduits will vent into this chamber." One of the Marines hesitated. "That'll roast us too." Lyra looked up, her gaze cutting through the smoke and panic. "Only if I miscalculate." "I don't miscalculate." The Threx swarmed through the doorway just as she hit the command sequence. Blinding light filled the chamber, a burst of blue plasma that rolled through the vents like liquid fire. The synthetic creatures shrieked in mechanical distortion as their shells melted. The heat shimmered, rippling through the air, and for a heartbeat the world was all noise and light. When it was over, silence pressed down on them like a weight. The Marines coughed, wiping soot from their visors. The walls glowed faintly, the metal cooling with a low hiss. "Jesus," one of them whispered. "You really knew what you were doing." Lyra didn't respond. She stared at the console's flickering display, where a line of text appeared, * core systems unlocked. Authorization, Dragon 1 confirmed, *. The old name hung in her mind like an echo she had tried to bury. She reached out, disabling the terminal, but not before the AI spoke again, louder this time. "Command authority recognized. Shall I contact remaining Vanguard units?" The Marines looked at her in confusion. "Vanguard?" the young one asked. "As in, the old war legends." Lyra's jaw clenched. "Ignore it. That network was dismantled years ago." But as she turned to lead them onward, the faint sound of a coded transmission pulsed through the air, a rhythmic signal that hadn't been heard in decades. It repeated 3 times, then went silent. Outside the hull, more Threx ships descended, their formations shifting into perfect geometric patterns. The battle above Vega 4 intensified, and the human fleet, scattered and unprepared, began to realize that someone, somewhere, had just reignited a legend. Lyra felt it in her blood. The dragon had stirred again, and there would be no turning back. The aftermath of the battle left Delta Station 9 eerily still. Smoke drifted through the corridors, twisting in the artificial gravity like ghostly tendrils. The walls bore the scorch marks of plasma fire, and the scent of ozone lingered, sharp and metallic. Somewhere deep in the infrastructure, coolant hissed through fractured pipes, the station groaning like an old beast stirred from slumber. Lyra walked among the wreckage in silence. The Marines followed her at a distance, speaking only in whispers, as if afraid to disturb whatever force she had awakened. They reached the central command nexus, a vast chamber surrounded by panoramic viewports that showed the carnage outside. Dozens of Threx vessels still hovered in the black expanse, their angular shapes illuminated by the flickering light of burning wrecks. The human fleet was in disarray. What few ships remained were scattered across the sector, their signals faint and desperate. The station had survived the first wave, but it was far from victory. Lyra approached the command terminal and brushed away a layer of dust. The old holosurface responded instantly to her touch, projecting a cascade of holographic data streams. The display recognized her at once, her name, her rank, and the insignia that hadn't been used in years. Commander Lyra Dean, 7th Terran Vanguard. The title glowed faintly in the dark, and for a moment she simply stared at it, her reflection caught in the blue light. That name didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to someone who had lived and died in another era, someone forged by war and broken by peace. Yet the station remembered, and so, it seemed, did the network. Vanguard? Captain Vale's voice was hoarse as he stepped closer, leaning heavily on a damaged railing. His wounds were wrapped in quick-seal bandages, his uniform stained with dried blood. I thought they were disbanded after the Outer Rim rebellions. They were, Lyra said. Officially. He studied her carefully, eyes narrowing. But you were one of them. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she called up a tactical map, her fingers gliding across the holographic interface. The layout of the surrounding systems unfolded, dozens of red markers indicating Threx fleet movements, expanding like an infection through the Vega corridor. The Vanguard were ghosts, she said finally. Black Ops divisions. We did the jobs the fleet couldn't admit existed. When the treaties were signed, we were erased. One of the Marines shifted uneasily. So what happened to you? Why a waitress? Lyra's gaze lingered on the map, the blue glow soft against her face. After the last battle, I walked away. Too many people died under my command. The galaxy didn't need heroes, it needed to forget them. The console chimed, interrupting her. A new signal appeared on the map, faint but persistent, broadcasting on a frequency so old it was almost myth. A triple pulse followed by a pause. Again. And again. Vale frowned. That's a Vanguard signal. Lyra's stomach tightened. It shouldn't exist. That network was dismantled when the accords were signed. Then who's sending it? She magnified the signal, tracking its source. It came from beyond Vega's orbit, deep within the asteroid belt, where old war debris and derelict stations drifted silently. There shouldn't have been anything alive there. The AI's voice broke the silence, its tone calm and measured. Residual network fragments detected. Units operating under legacy protocols may have reactivated upon identification of command authority. In other words, Vale muttered, you just woke up more ghosts. Lyra turned away from the console, pacing slowly. Memories surfaced like cracks in glass, soldiers in exo-armor, battlefields lit by plasma storms, the faces of those who'd followed her into impossible odds. The Vanguard hadn't been ordinary soldiers. They'd been engineered for adaptability, trained to fight where machines and logic failed. They were the answer to the galaxy's cruelty, and its greatest weapon. She looked out the viewport again. The stars beyond flickered as the Threx fleet repositioned. Their movements were unnaturally synchronized, like a living algorithm. They're learning, she said quietly. Every engagement, every tactic we use, they're adapting. Vale nodded grimly. They're AI-linked. One learns, all learn. Which means, she said, turning back to him, we can't fight them with predictability. We need chaos, something no algorithm can anticipate. The captain hesitated, understanding dawning in his eyes. Humans. Lyra allowed herself a small, grim smile. Exactly. She reactivated the console and began inputting coordinates. We'll go dark and drift toward the signal source. If there are Vanguard remnants still operational, we'll need them. And if it's a trap, she looked up, her voice soft but steady. Then I'll finish what I started years ago. The Marines exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke. The decision had already been made, and in her voice they heard something they couldn't name, not command, not courage, but inevitability. Hours later, the station's engines rumbled to life. The lights dimmed as the power diverted to propulsion. Through the viewport, Vega's pale light fell away, replaced by the silent void. The station moved slowly, deliberately, vanishing into the asteroid belt's shadow. In the darkened command room, Lyra stood alone before the console, watching the signal pulse faintly in the distance. Somewhere out there, in the black sea of forgotten battles, the past was calling her home. She didn't know if she was ready to answer, but the galaxy had already made that choice for her. Behind her, the AI spoke once more. "Commander Dean, incoming encrypted transmission." She froze. "From where?" "Origin unknown. Authentication code matches Vanguard classification level 1. The voice that followed was distorted, layered with static, but she recognized it instantly, a voice she had buried along with everything she once was. "Dragon 1, it said, steady and cold. "We've been waiting." The asteroid belt stretched before them like a shattered mirror, fragments of rock and ice drifting in silent, deliberate arcs around the pale light of Vega. Delta Station 9 moved cautiously, its engines whispering against the vacuum, shields flickering intermittently as Lyra adjusted the power flow to compensate for gravitational anomalies and stray radiation fields. The Threx fleet had not pursued them directly, but their shadows lingered on the sensors, hunting drones sweeping the void, their black hulls glinting in intermittent starlight. Lyra's fingers hovered over the console, tracing the signal that had awakened the Vanguard remnants. Each pulse carried a coded rhythm, a heartbeat from a time she had thought lost. Captain Vale watched her from the command chair, wounded but resolute. "You really think anyone's out there?" he asked. The words came quietly, almost hesitant, as if the thought of old ghosts returning could unsettle the mind more than the present danger. "They're there," she replied without hesitation. Her voice carried the weight of certainty, the echo of decades spent on battlefields where hesitation meant death. The signal only activates when command authority is recognized. Someone, or something, is responding. The Marines worked in tense silence, their weapons cleaned and reloaded, scanning the shifting shadows for any sign of the Threx. The youngest of them, a cadet named Jarn, adjusted his visor repeatedly, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. He had heard stories of the Vanguard from the archives, but none of those tales had prepared him for a human actually commanding an ancient network from a decrepit cantina station. Lyra's mind was elsewhere, running calculations, overlaying predicted drone paths with possible ambush points. Her body moved in quiet rehearsal, shifting from station console to sensor arrays, her every gesture precise, economical. The station's AI, long dormant, had awoken under her command, whispering fragments of memory she had left behind. Asterisk core systems operational. Tactical alignment required. Asterisk its voice was calm, almost reverent. "They'll test us before they trust us," she murmured. "We need to be ready." The first contact came as a glimmer on the long-range sensors, a single corvette, sleek, black, its markings faint but unmistakable. Lyra's chest tightened. She had known that ship, had piloted her own against similar hulls in wars where the stakes were measured in planets lost and lives extinguished. The corvette moved with deliberate grace, almost predatory, weaving between asteroids with the confidence of a pilot who had never doubted the reach of her own skill. "Identification?" Vale asked, leaning closer to the console. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Vanguard. And if they've survived this long, they're not alone." The corvette hailed them in an old encrypted channel. The transmission was layered, coded to Vanguard protocols she had once memorized. Asterisk Dragon 1, acknowledge. Legacy unit active. Extraction required, asterisk. Lyra's pulse quickened. She knew the implications. The remnants of the Vanguard were scattered, surviving in isolated sectors, their loyalty preserved only for those who held the authority to command. To call them meant risking exposure, but in the void, hesitation would be fatal. "Prepare for docking," she ordered. "Open the secondary bay. Seal all outer hatches. We can't let the Threx see what's coming." The Marines moved with renewed energy, the fear in their eyes tempered by the growing respect for the woman who had orchestrated their survival. As the corvette drifted closer, Lyra accessed the station's auxiliary systems, opening channels of communication and aligning the docking clamps. The old machines groaned in response, their servos straining after years of inactivity. When the Vanguard pilot stepped through the docking airlock, Lyra saw a figure both familiar and distant. The armor was scratched and patched, the insignia faded, yet the bearing, the stance, and the cold fire in the eyes were unmistakable. "Dragon 1, the pilot said, voice calm but edged with steel. "We received your activation. The network is responding." Lyra stepped forward, her own armor now donned over her simple uniform. "It's been a long time," she said. "Too long. The galaxy forgot us," the pilot replied. "But the Threx haven't. And neither have we." In the observation bay, additional blips began to appear on the long-range sensors, small, almost imperceptible signatures, Vanguard units scattered among the asteroids, hidden and waiting. Lyra recognized the patterns instantly: stealth corvettes, automated reconnaissance drones, orbital defense platforms built in secret. The remnants were not many, but each one was deadly, each one trained to respond without hesitation. Vale glanced at her, the weight of understanding settling over him. "So we're not just fighting for survival. We're rallying a ghost army." Lyra's jaw tightened. "A ghost army that knows nothing of the world we left behind. And if we fail," she let the thought hang, unspoken but understood. The AI interfaced with the Vanguard vessels, linking communications in a web of legacy codes and encrypted channels. Holomarkers flickered across the command table, showing positions, trajectories, and tactical overlays. Lyra traced her finger along the map. "We'll split them into 3 squadrons. 2 will engage the Threx scouts and draw them away from the signal source. The 3rd will follow me. We locate the origin, and we see if the rest of the Vanguard is truly alive." The docking clamps hissed open, and the first of the Vanguard units moved into the station. Their presence was both a relief and a reminder of what humanity was capable: disciplined, coordinated, and lethal. Lyra watched them integrate into the station's defenses, systems once dormant now responding to their combined authority. Outside, a Threx drone swept past a distant asteroid, scanning for signs of the station's movement. Its sensors flickered across the void, detecting the faint energy signatures of the newly activated Vanguard units. Lyra's lips curved slightly. They had arrived just in time. "Every unit counts," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And every life we save today becomes part of a force the galaxy will not forget." The corvette's pilot nodded, stepping aside to allow additional units to dock. "Legacy network reactivated," they said. "We await your command." Lyra's eyes swept across the holographic display, the scattered remnants of humanity's forgotten warriors, and the encroaching Threx fleet beyond. For the first time in years, she felt the surge of something long dormant: purpose, strategy, and the raw, unyielding power of an underestimated species. "Then we begin," she said. "And the galaxy will remember the dragon." The Threx attack hit like a storm without warning. Delta Station 9 shuddered under the impact of plasma volleys, its reinforced hull screaming under the strain. The automated turrets whirred to life, cutting arcs of molten energy across the docking bay where enemy drones tried to swarm in formation. The Marines moved with grim determination, guided by Lyra's precise commands, but even they could feel the tide of the assault pressing against them. Lyra stood at the center of the command nexus, her hands moving across multiple consoles simultaneously. Shield generators hummed in response to her input, power diverted from non-essential systems, and the station's defense arrays cycled through rotational vectors with an efficiency only she could orchestrate. Every decision she made seemed preordained, her mind calculating trajectories, firing solutions, and fallback options faster than any of the soldiers could follow. The first boarding party breached a maintenance hatch, their serrated limbs cutting through the secondary airlock. Lyra directed the Marines to intercept, her voice calm but sharp. "Sector 7, flank left. Cover the hull breach." A soldier hesitated for just a moment, but a glance at her, cold, focused, unyielding, snapped him into motion. Together they met the Threx in the narrow corridor, plasma fire meeting the alien exoskeletons in a symphony of sparks and twisted metal. Lyra moved among them, firing with precision, ducking, spinning, and reloading faster than seemed possible. The Marines began to understand instinctively, she was not just leading them, she was reshaping the battlefield with her presence. Through the viewport, the orbital cannons flared as the Threx fleet attempted to overwhelm the station. Lyra calculated the timing of each volley, synchronizing the turrets with the station's maneuvering thrusters. Explosions rippled across space, illuminating the dark void with bursts of white and blue fire. The Threx drones adapted quickly, their AI algorithms predicting the human countermeasures, but Lyra anticipated each response, her strategies unpredictable and fluid. A sudden alarm blared. Sensors detected a massive boarding ship approaching at an untracked vector, larger than any unit they had engaged. The crew froze, and even the AI hesitated. "They've brought their heavy unit," Vale muttered. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time we remind them why humans are unpredictable." She moved to the weapons console, overriding the safety protocols to access the plasma conduits directly. The old station had systems long abandoned, capable of channeling immense energy through the lower decks. She rerouted the conduits, directing a concentrated pulse toward the docking bay where the boarding ship would arrive. The vessel breached the outer shields, and alarms screamed through the station. Lyra's pulse rifle was already in her hands. She took a deep breath, the rhythm steady despite the chaos. The first wave of Threx entered the bay, and she fired in measured bursts, each shot precise, each kill deliberate. Sparks flew, and the air vibrated with energy as metal tore under plasma impact. Then she heard it, the hum of the ship's main core, a deep resonance that pulsed through the floor. The Threx War AI, Archon, was aboard, sending directives to the drones with unnerving efficiency. Lyra realized the magnitude of the threat. If Archon reached the station's core systems, the entire defense network would collapse. "Seal the secondary doors," she shouted. "Draw it into the reactor corridor." The Marines obeyed, retreating in tight formation as Lyra led the enemy into the narrow chamber, the scent of ozone thick in the air. Plasma vents hissed and opened at her command, preloaded with volatile energy, ready to engulf anything that crossed the threshold. The Threx swarmed in, their AI calculating every possibility, but Lyra anticipated each movement, each strategy, each instinctive reaction. The first drones fell to the vents, incinerated before they could reach her. The rest pressed on, but she lured them deeper, guiding them toward the heart of the reactor chamber where Archon waited. Her hands moved over the reactor's manual controls, locking doors, diverting power, and preparing the final trap. Archon materialized at the chamber entrance, a black, angular machine, larger than any drone, with eyes glowing a cold red. Its voice cut through the station, distorted but sharp, *Dragon 1 detected. Resistance is irrelevant, *. Lyra met it without fear. Resistance isn't irrelevant. It's inevitable. The battle was immediate. Plasma fire met reinforced alloy, energy pulses collided with human reflex and ingenuity. Lyra dodged a strike, rolled, and fired, striking Archon's joint actuators. Sparks erupted, and the AI's movements faltered for a heartbeat, enough for her to trigger the reactor vent sequence. The chamber erupted in white-blue plasma, consuming the corridor in a storm of energy. The sound was deafening, the heat immense, and the light so intense it cast shifting shadows across every surface. When the eruption subsided, the corridor was a smoldering ruin. Smoke curled into the vents, and the hum of the station's systems returned in a low, steady pulse. Through the debris, the Marines crawled out, coughing and blinking against the lingering light. Vale looked at Lyra, his expression a mixture of disbelief and awe. You did it." Lyra wiped soot from her armor, her eyes scanning the wreckage. "No," she said quietly. "We did it. And it's not over." The station had survived, but the Threx fleet was still out there, regrouping, adapting, calculating. Lyra knew this victory was temporary, a single strike in a war that would not end with one battle. But as she looked at the exhausted faces of the Marines, and the faint traces of the Vanguard signal still pulsing in the distance, she allowed herself a small, grim smile. In the void, the dragon had risen once more, and the galaxy would remember, not for a single station or a single battle, but for the indomitable spirit of humans who refused to be underestimated. The fight was far from over, but the fire of legend had been rekindled, and nothing would extinguish it so long as she lived. The void was quiet for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Delta Station 9 floated among fractured asteroids, its hull scarred but intact, shields flickering softly as emergency systems maintained minimal power. The Threx fleet had been pushed back, its drones scattered, its heavy units destroyed or disabled by the precision and cunning of the Vanguard forces. For the first time since the assault began, Lyra allowed herself to breathe, though the weight of command pressed heavily against her chest. The battle was over, but the echoes of war remained. Captain Vale moved slowly along the bridge, inspecting the Marines and the station's damage reports. His uniform bore new scorch marks and tattered fabric, evidence of a battle fought at the edge of despair. "We made it," he said, his voice low. "Against impossible odds." Lyra didn't respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic display showing the remaining Threx signatures retreating into deep space. "We did," she said finally, her voice steady but carrying the weight of years she had buried. "But not alone." The Vanguard answered. "The ghosts we thought lost, they were never gone. They were waiting for the call, waiting for someone to recognize authority once more." Across the observation deck, the black corvettes of the remaining Vanguard units drifted in formation, their sleek hulls casting faint glimmers of reflected starlight. They were spectral soldiers, living remnants of a war humanity had tried to forget, now awakened and loyal to the one who had once commanded them. Each ship pulsed with energy, a testament to ingenuity, training, and the unbreakable bond forged in countless campaigns against the odds. Vale glanced at Lyra, studying the woman who had been a simple waitress at Delta Station 9 only days before. You really were the Dragon One," he said quietly, as if speaking it aloud would make it real. Lyra's eyes softened, just slightly. "I never stopped being her," she admitted. "I only chose a different battlefield." The AI's voice cut through the room, calm and melodic. "Residual enemy forces detected. Probability of renewed Threx aggression low. Core systems operational at 97%. Vanguard network integrity restored." Lyra nodded, feeling the tension begin to ease. "Good. Begin long-range scans. Let's make sure they stay in retreat." A young Marine approached her, hesitating. "Commander, what happens now? Do we just go back to the fleet?" Lyra turned, her eyes meeting his. "We rebuild," she said. "Not just the station, not just the fleet, but the message. Humanity is capable of more than the galaxy remembers. We've been underestimated for too long. Now, they'll know." Vale stepped closer. "And you? What will you do?" She allowed herself a rare smile, a faint curve that didn't quite reach her eyes but carried warmth. "I'll disappear again. Let them see the dragon as legend, not as a person. Some truths are more powerful when they live in stories." Yet she didn't walk away immediately. She moved through the station, checking compartments, ensuring the wounded were stable, that systems were functioning. The Marines followed her, their respect deepened into something bordering on awe. She wasn't merely a soldier. She was a reminder that survival and leadership were born not from armor or weaponry alone, but from clarity of mind, decisiveness, and courage when all else fails. From the observation deck, she watched the Vanguard ships depart, their engines leaving faint trails of ionized particles across the asteroid belt. Somewhere among the debris and the cold black of space, more of the network's hidden units would emerge, ready to answer her signal if needed. The galaxy had not forgotten humanity entirely, it had only paused, waiting for a spark. And that spark had ignited. Vale's voice broke the quiet. "The crew, they'll talk about this for decades. Lyra shook her head. Let them. Let the galaxy talk. They should remember the humans who rise when all others doubt them. That's the truth worth keeping. She turned her gaze outward, beyond the station, beyond the retreating enemy, to the stars scattered across the infinite black. Each one seemed to pulse faintly, as if acknowledging her presence, as if bearing witness to what humans could achieve when underestimated. She felt the weight of history settle around her, the victories, the losses, the ghosts she had commanded, and the lives that depended on her choices. Then, finally, she stepped away from the console, leaving the Marines to their post-battle checks. The station was secure, the fleet had regained hope, and the Threx threat had been temporarily quelled. In the silence, she allowed herself a private thought, a promise that if the galaxy needed her again, she would rise, not as a waitress, not as a legend, but as the dragon who refused to be underestimated. The stars beyond Vega 4 twinkled, distant but undeniable. Somewhere out there, other humans survived, waiting for a signal, a chance, a reminder that nothing in the galaxy was as it seemed. Lyra Dean, Dragon 1, had given them that spark. And in the quiet hum of Delta Station 9, amid fractured asteroids and the echoes of war, humanity's potential shone brighter than any star. The legend of the Dragon Lady would endure, not as a story of a single battle, but as a reminder that even in the vast emptiness of space, the underestimated could rise, unbound, unstoppable, and unforgettable. The galaxy, at last, would remember.